First and foremost, I would like to thank all of you for joining in today. Thanks a lot. My name is Kapil Nakra and one of the co-founders of Digital Vidya. Today we have a very interesting and very special session planned for all of you. The topic of today's session is Millennial Leadership, Building a Rewarding Career in the Digital World. Actually, today is the first session that we would actually not talk anything about digital marketing. What we would be talking about is what impacts you in building a career in the digital world. So, believe me or not, when it comes to really getting things done, even in the digital marketing space, most of the time, the things that you really need to be aware of is how to really deal with people in your organization across domains, across verticals. So, and today we have a somebody very senior who is here to lead this session. In today's session, what we're going to talk about is how to lead the new generation of fast trackers, how to deal with the generation shift, how to handle professionalism with the difference, and the role of coaching in the Google It world. So that's the topic. That's the key takeaways that you can expect from today's session. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, uh, well, we'll have a presentation for about 30-35 minutes, and then we will have open Q&A for another 20-25 minutes. And when the session is on, if you have any question, just keep typing it down in the question panel, and we'll try to take up all the questions in the chronological order. So give me just 1 minute now. I'll just switch the camera as well as share my screen so that the presentation is available and Rajdeep is here to talk to you about. So I'll just take a minute to make this shift happen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, at this point in time, really don't know how many of you are, of which gender. So I'm just saying, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope I don't offend anybody by missing anybody out. So I wish you a very good afternoon and welcome to the session on millennial leadership. Uh, Before I go any further, if I can just quickly, kind of introduce myself and give you an understanding of where I come from. Uh, my name is Rajdeep Lalvani. I'm an associate vice president with the Times of India Group, and I've been working across various industries for close to about 25, 30 years. In fact, not 25, but 30 years is more like it. Okay, and very clearly, you have my coordinates in terms of my various social media platforms on which I am active, and those details are available on the screen. Now, before I go any further, there's one thing which I really do need to impress upon is that this presentation is more of a knowledge sharing presentation than point of view which is being expressed by the Times of India group. Okay, these views are today globally being discussed and debated and so on and so forth. So in no way does this presentation really convey a viewpoint which is the Times of India viewpoint. So I want this to be absolutely clear with the entire forum. And having said that, I'm more or less ready to start with the presentation and share whatever I need to share with you all. And the first thing I need to do is I need to find out how many of you are, in which part of the age group. You can see it on the screen is that there are different age groups, and I'd like to really understand what made which which part of the century and so on and so forth made your parents very happy when you were born to them. So this is more to understand where you're coming from. We've got about 47, 48, 50% of the votes. Wow, that's fast. We're up to 60% of the people voting. So Okay, I think I have quite a bit of my work cut out for myself. And I think we've also selected a very appropriate topic, by the way, because I find that 2% of the participants are in the group of born between 1946 to 1964. Okay, and we have 14% of you who are born between 1965 to 1976, and a majority of the participants, that's 84% of you all, are in the group which is born post 1977, or maybe not, or even in 1977. So that's absolutely amazing. Okay, and thanks for that poll and thanks for participating there. I just want to very quickly now walk you into the next part of this presentation. Is that how many of you have heard of these terms? Okay, you know, terms that we'll be talking about. There's a huge amount of these terms which I don't know if some of you have. There was a generation which we heard called the GI generation, which had a, cry called the "We Will Prevail" cry. And we also had a generation called baby boomers, hear us roar. And there was a silent generation, then there was a millennial generation. We've also got a Gen X, and we've also now recently started looking at the millennial generation. And finally, there is another generation which we're talking about, which is the Gen Z. So, these are terms which I'm sure somewhere or the other we have heard in our entire life. And if we haven't, well, welcome to the real world, because we are going to be talking about a lot of these discussion points. And in fact, the presentation is all about millennials. So you will hear a lot of the millennial generation aspect in any case. I'm moving on to the next slide. Is that I'm really going to start looking at the polls that you all went for, and how these polls relate to the various categories, and where is it that the major traits are for these group of people. So the first group, of course, fortunately or unfortunately, which is the pre 1936 born group, which today, to my calculation as of 2015, would be in the region of about 79 years and above. Okay. And during that period, these people experienced, the people who were in that age group, of course, experienced things like World War One. They went through that. They went through World War Two. They went through the Great Depression in the U.S. And in our own environment, we had the emergence of Mahatma Gandhi in the 1920s, who was subsequently to become a huge leader for the Indian uh, independent movement. And this group of people were typically, they had some major traits that used to be there with them. And those traits were that they were very formal. There was a uniformity about all of these people in terms of how they cut their hair, what kind of dress codes they had, what kind of shoes and the colors, and what kind of likes and dislikes that were there, and so on and so forth. One was because the choices were limited, and the other was that there was a sense of emulation that the society was built on. Um, they also had very strong beliefs in terms of public interests being top of mind, and the way they connected with people was on a face-to-face basis. That means personal connections were very high in their agenda, because those days, I think, and I certainly wasn't there during that time, is that one is that connectivity was a big dampener, because it was not so heavily proliferated into the system. Um, we then moved on to a newer generation, which, of course, while the pre 36 generation, 1936 generation was typically already engaged in the World War One, they had not yet experienced World War Two, but they did very later as the years go by, in the 1940s, 1939, they did enter the World War II, and those were the prime years of the pre 1936 generation. Uh, these people today, which is the next group, is 1937 to 1945. These are typically ladies and gentlemen who are, God willing, and in an age group of anywhere between 70 years to 78 years. And the kind of events that happened in their lifetime was World War II. There was a Great Depression, which also carried through into it. There was food rationing, which was introduced across the world. There was a famine, there was shortage of food, all this stuff. And the major traits that this generation had was respect for authority, hard work. They were very, very, sensitive about personal connections with people, and the manner in which they like to connect with other friends, family, and other people was over the telephone. Because by now, the telephone had become an instrument of mass communication across the world. And this is the generation which is really of great interest to me because I belong to this generation, which is the 1946 to 1964. Although I'm on the extreme borderline of this generation, myself being in the 1962 bracket. So I am in the 50 plus range. And during this period, the kind of things that happened during my lifetime and which kind of dictated my belief system and my way of thinking, and they kind of moderated my way of looking at things, was that in India we had the Indo-China aggression in 1962. um, Basis the poll, I think only about um, 2% of the entire group would recall anything, maybe. And quite possible that some of you who are history students might also recall it. So, pardon my making that sweeping statement. But I'm saying Indo-China aggression of 1962, the civil rights movement, the independence for the country, women's liberation, the Cold War between the US and Russia, the introduction of the color television, and of course, global famine were some of the hallmarks of this period. And the major traits of people during this period, and I kind of feel very proud to be, part of this group and having had some of these traits, is that we had a very exploratory sense of traits. We were very optimistic about the future, and we were very work centric and had a very high level of loyalty. And one of the things that was a very important part for all of us in this, for a majority of us, was that the career that we took on was defined by our employer. So whichever job we first got into became the job that we kind of stuck to for life. And this is the period where the overlaps between the last three generations kind of started. The if I can say that differently, is that this generation was the last generation where we could turn around and say that there was a major connectivity with the previous generation. And this is also a generation where we started for the first time hearing of things like generation gap. This is where the way of thinking between the pre 1936, pre 1945, and the pre 1964 generations kind of started getting thrown up very, very cleanly, where we started describing any difference of thinking as a generation gap with the next generation, which was really speaking the 1965 to the 1976 generation. This is when the Vietnam War happened. Of course, in India, we had two wars with Pakistan during this period. One was in 1965, and the other one was in 1971. We also saw the Watergate scandal. This also is known as the MTV generation internationally. We saw the advent of Greenpeace. We saw droughts across the country. So I'm saying these were all formative, and they also did have some impact on the previous generation in some manner. So you will always have this bit of overlap, is that the last part of the previous generation will always have some influencing that would happen from the newly identified period of the generation now. And of course, as you'll see from the screen, is that this generation of 1965 to 1976, which is now anywhere between 39 years to 50 years of age, some of the traits that they threw up was that they were kind of individualistic. However, they were fairly flexible by all standards. Uh, they also were huge rebels against authority. They were tech explorers, and their primary way of communicating with friends, family, and colleagues was through the SMS and the email. Wow. It started way, way, way ahead. And moving on quickly to the next generation, which is where I think the majority of our uh, respondents to the poll are, is the age group between 22 to 38, which is typically born between 1977 to 1993. And these guys, all of you typically have grown up with concepts of AIDS, technology, the personal computer. Most of you have, and when I'm talking about the major events, I'm talking about the beginning of the period. Okay, I am aware that by the time you guys actually started off, the laptop had already kind of emerged over here, but the computer came in only 1981, more or less, the personal computer, which is what I'm talking about. Although computing had come of age, major events were awareness about the environment and, of course, the advent on emergence of Hotmail. The major traits for these people were they were technically very comfortable. They were hugely family centric. They were again optimistic, which is very, very something common to the group. Couple, I think we've got disconnected. So anyway, I'm continuing. So
No, Rajdeep, you are audible. There is no issue at all.
okay,
I can hear you clearly.
perfect. So I'm just removing this iCloud connectivity. I think that's
Sure, sure. Please do that.
yeah.
We
So
can just do it later. Yeah,
sorry,
thank you.
sorry about that interruption, ladies and gentlemen. So continuing from there is that um, this group also had some commonalities in terms of being optimistic, which is again a trait which was shown in the group, which is today 51 plus years of age up to 70 years of age. And of course, you had another perspective is that this is the group which I don't know if there are too many people here because the poll doesn't throw it up. But I'm sure that if there are any youngsters who are 21 years of age and below, they would be fully aware of, they're actually being what you say as they are being groomed under the influence of, topics like 9/11, 26/11, which is for those of you who are kind of, disconnected. 26/11 was what happened in Bombay. Uh, there's also the influence of the Gulf War, Afghanistan War, Kargil War, uh, concepts of Google Glass and nano computing and stuff like that, which is now kind of shaping the manner in which the generations think. Now, there's one of the reasons why I'm doing this exercise with you all is that sometimes, in our race to gather knowledge in the technical sphere and relating to our workspace, we kind of miss out on the softer elements of things. And those softer element of things are what we are talking about is to get an understanding of who are the people who we interact with in our day-to-day lives. Maybe we don't interact with people who are pre-36 born or maybe even the 1945 pre-born periods and stuff like that, but we certainly do interact with people across various spectrums. Even my chaiwala for some, in some cases could be in the 1945 or maybe even in the early 1946 onward kind of batch. So I'm saying somewhere the generations understanding is very, very critical for all of us. So that's what I'm trying to do through these slides, and I'm going to continue this whole thing and put a very clear map, perspective to these periods. Now the pre 1936 group, which is defined over here on the top, is called the GI generation. Okay, the next group, which is the currently between 1937 to 1945, is what you call as the silent generation. Now, there's a reason why this is called a silent generation, is that the impact of the two wars that happened and the Great Depression and all the aspects, actually made this generation a very quiet generation. And they really were kind of, bowed under the pressure of what had happened in the previous years. Going forward, the next generation is the one of the most exciting generations that started up from 1946 to 1964, which is what we call as the baby boomers. Okay, and I love to and I love to call myself one of those baby boomers, but uh, that's where it is. And then came the generation which was the 1965 to 76 generation, which is what is called as the Gen Xers or Gen X. And I still recall when my father used to, kind of want to deal with my brother, and in a lot of cases, even with me, he says, "You guys don't understand." This was a very common statement which was made by my father, my grandfather, and stuff like that. So this is what was actually the generation gap. And this generation gap is nothing more than the fact that, compared to the major traits that we had in terms of, or what they, saw in the earlier years of respect for authority and stuff like that, the Gen X, as we call it, was very individualistic. They were more flexible. This was also, to a large extent, the beginning of what you call as the hippie generation. Okay, and for people who were very, very used to, formal dressing and hard work and respect for authority, this period was a huge shock for them. So for them, it was really a, you know, generation which they couldn't understand too well, and they called it, generation gap. Now, um, of course, we have the next generation, which is the 1977 generation, and going up to 1993, which is where all of you have polled hugely. And that group is what is the current group of people, and they are called the millennials. And this is what we are going to be focusing on discussing today. And the various interactions between the various groups and so on and so forth. Then the last group, of course, we've labeled it as the Gen Z, is the group that's in place, but it's quite possible that this group will get labeled differently in the years to go and come rather. Okay, so let's just move slightly further and get a deeper understanding of this group of generations and this clustering that we've talked about, because somewhere in our lives we are going to be dealing with the various segments. To my understanding, I think the majority of your dealings, most of you who are currently on this webinar, will be with people who are in their late 50s, or rather early 50s, and maybe even slightly ahead. And you will continue to deal with the segment of the baby boomers. You will deal with Gen X, you will deal with millennials, which are your own colleagues, and you will also be strongly dealing with the Gen Zs. So let's understand these people a bit more. Okay, and here's what comes to the kind of thing. So I'm going to straight away move into this. And compared to some of the aspects of what are the kind of aspirations that these various segments had, look at the aspirations that were typically there between 1946 and how they evolved right through till 1993. You look at aspirations in the segment of baby boomers, which is the 1946 to 64 segment. It was all about job security, retirement, financial security, and so on and so forth. So even today, when I have to plan anything, I look at my job, how am I going to retire, or how am I going to survive, how am I going to manage things, what is my financial strength, and so on and so forth. So these are my basic points that I aspire to. And on the other hand, the aspirations of my brother would be more like work-life balance, financial security, a slightly more carefree attitude, and so on and so forth. And of course, with the current group of millennials, which is the second last group, it's more about freedom and flexibility. Anything that gives them freedom and flexibility is what rocks them in their life. Um Compared to an automobile, a homeowner kind of tag that I wanted for myself. Today's tag that I'm looking for, which I typically talk about in the current group, is that you're happy being connected to the internet. Your mobile phone is your life, smartphones, laptops, tablets. Um, in my day and age, maybe to some extent even now, the employer was the Annadata. Okay. And the next group right next to them was the Gen Xers, which had a loyalty to the profession, not necessarily to the organization, which was a huge shift from being an Annadata. And it suddenly said that people in the next generation were loyal to the profession, not to the organization, which was to some of our predecessors like my father, my grandfather. It was a shock to their way of thinking, and mm, to some of us who are looking at maybe more than two or three generations in their family, I'm sure some of the career attitudes that you all have, like digital entrepreneurs, work with organizations not for kind of concepts and a way of thinking, is is could be treated as a huge shock to some of us. You know, one of the ways to look at it is that maybe same gender marriages today is something that is more acceptable to the Gen Xers and the millennials compared to, let's say, the baby boomers. Yeah, okay, and maybe to that extent, even the silent generation and the Gen X, the GI generations. Um, the Gen Zs, of course, are going to be completely okay. It's open life for them. Now, here is the huge, perspective that we need to keep in mind going through into this presentation is that as of now, we have 15% of the total world's population, okay, which is in their group of 51 to 69 age group, which is the baby boomers. Okay, they are most of them are in leadership positions, and a lot of them have already retired or are in a consulting kind of environment, and so on and so forth. But this is a group which is still around. Next is the Gen Xers. This is the first, crazy generation as we call it. Now these people are about 30% in the workforce, and they are in senior team management positions and higher, and they are managing, if not all, and I'm being very generic over here. It is quite possible that there's a slight bit of difference that even a person who's 22 would be leading other people in the Gen X kind of environment. So I'm saying 50% of the population is in the age group of 22 to 38 across the world, and we're averaging this whole thing out. And these are all sources which are taken from various set of surveys and so on and so forth. So I'm saying it's very important for us to understand this segment because this is what we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Is the circle that is marked there talks about 15% in the group which is about to move away. You will end up with two primary groups, which is going to be the group which is called the Gen X, and the group which is going to be called the millennials. And the way these people think is, while there is an overlap in a lot of cases, but there is bound to be a difference in the way they, you know, think and the way they approach things. Because anybody who's born in 65 will certainly not be operating in the age group of how the 1990 environment kind of person thinks. So I'm saying we need to keep these perspectives in mind while we're going further into the presentation. So that's how it looks like. Is that today, if you really look at it, every generation sees itself as the best. And no doubt, a lot of us have heard endless statements which talk about हमारे जमाने में तो बच्चे ऐसे करते थे और वो इज्जत करते थे और ऐसे नहीं करते थे and so on and so forth. And I'm sure some of you have kind of quietly smirked behind their back and walked away from it all. But I'm saying this is how it looks today. Each generation believes that they were the best. But trust me, each generation sees itself as being different and special. However, the fact of the matter remains is that the basic DNA of our system is the same. What has actually changed is the way we think and the belief systems that are creating the difference. And this is all being driven by the various major factors that influenced our growing up years. Okay, and in the world we live in, the human nature remains more or less the same. There's no difference. There's no difference, and a lot of us can kind of adapt to these perspectives, okay, whenever we need to. So that's a way of looking at it, if you really ask me. And if you really look at it, is that, and just reinforcing whatever we've discussed till now, is that we're talking about six generations of people who have kind of entered the workplace and gone out. The pre 1936 have certainly gone out of the workforce. Okay, there is a group of 1937 to 1945, which is the silent generation, which have gone out of the workforce, and if at all they are part of the workforce, they are in emeritus kind of roles where they are titular heads and chairman emeritus and stuff like that. There are the baby boomers, which are the 1946 to 1964 group. They are still active, and some of them are kind of moving away. And hopefully, I will also move away from this group, say another 8 years or so from, and then kind of move away. And the group which has really become very active is the group which is the Gen Xers, and they are hugely active. A lot of them, and most of them, are in leadership roles, and they are leading the group which is present on this webinar today, which is called the Millennial Group. The primary workforce, which today constitutes 50% of the world's workforce population. And believe me, they are in a hurry, they are impatient, and boy, they are really looking at some action in their life. And they're not going to wait for anybody to come and tell them how to do things and so on and so forth. And the fun of this entire exercise and this entire change will really start when the group which is currently born after 1994 kind of starts to join the workforce. Because this group, which is the 1994 plus group, is a group which is going to be absolutely different from the previous two generations because they are a combination. Okay, so they're going to be more responsive, they're going to be much more different, and so on and so forth. So, absolutely crazy stuff that is happening around us. While there's a lot of digital crazy stuff which is happening every day, evolution of generations is something that is not maybe happening at the same pace, but it's equally crazy stuff. There was a recent survey which was carried out by Deloitte on the millennials across the world, and Barry Salisbury, who is the CEO of Deloitte, he very clearly made a statement. He says that when looking at career goals, the millennial of today are just as interested in how a business develops its people and its contribution to society as they are in its products and services. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen out there, this is not how at least my group of people thought. We were very, very disconnected in terms of our contribution to society when we started our careers. We were more worried about, meeting our targets, meeting our career goals, and kind of stuff like that. But today's millennial, as we call it, is kind of an activist kind of set of people. They're looking at finding out, which company is contributing how much to the society. Okay, and you look at what's happening around us in terms of various initiatives that are being taken. Okay, candlelight marches and stuff like that, and taking to the road for everything that strongly, the millennial feels about is what is coming to the fore. You won't find a lot of people from the earlier generations coming into this, kind of an activist kind of a mode. But yes, we are also being influenced. And going back to this survey, is that Barry Salzberg said that to deal with this way of thinking, the business community will need to change the way they engage with the millennial talent or risk being left behind. Because this millennial talent is a very funny kind of segment. If they find an organization not meeting up to their kind of perspectives of what they want to see, they'll walk away from it. And once they start walking away from it, talent is going to be difficult for those companies to find. And that is what all of us know is what drives every organization. So I think somewhere all of us on this forum also need to become familiar with, because you're going to be leading these changes. Now, let's have a quick look at our Indian millennial. Now, this gentleman and this lady is completely in sync with what was happening. Okay, all the changes that are happening. There are just a few marginal changes that need to be tropicalized because these are country specific and region specific. Today we have a population of about 1252 million odd people, this World Bank estimates, and we are the second most populous country in the world. Uh, Out of our total population, we have 600 million millennials. Uh, that's 50% of our population. In spite of the attitudes and lifestyles that describe the global millennial, the Indian millennial brings to the table a combination of traditional values and some cultural perspectives also. It's a very, very, lethal combination, if you ask me. The reason why Indian millennials are more successful than maybe European millennials and the US millennials is because of this very strong blend of the millennial culture, traditional values, and the cultural perspectives. And I salute a lot of you out there who fall into this segment. Is that you guys are the future for all of us, and through this presentation, I kind of want to share with a lot of you what are the things that are going to be the focus of people who are maybe on some of the other age segments, in terms of kind of walking you through and maybe also kind of dealing with you as complete talent. There has been a study which was done by J. Walter Thompson, and that study supports this view of Indian millennials being very strong, and also their um, kind of labeling of the Indian millennial being that of a tech savvy traditionalist. Okay, and against in the West, you are quite likely to find the Indian millennial staying as a part of a large extended family, and the attitude towards getting a good bargain remains deeply ingrained in the mindset. Whereas a normal millennial is not bothered about what happens. Okay, so that's a bit of a difference. And 70% of the Indian millennials support tradition and preserve family values. Um, Also, this group of Indian millennials is not, tagged as, if I can use the Indian in the earlier term which was used by Europeans and foreigners as they were called at that time, is that bhukke nange Indians. Okay, the Indian millennial is no longer falls into that category, and the world knows it. This is a group which is kind of hungry for success. They are rich, they have disposable incomes, and trust me, ladies and gentlemen, they are hugely upwardly mobile. Okay, now see, I couple at this stage, I just want to take a pause. Okay, and I've talked about some of these aspects, and I think we've been talking for about close to 40 minutes. So I do need to, hear some kind of a perspective from the participants. Let's hear what is it that you think about the Indian millennial, and what do you think about the various generations that we've talked about right now? Let's hear some of your views. Let's hear what you say.
Great. So, since I'm part of the millennial, I'll start the whole conversation,
Sure.
and then rest of you can join in. So, guys, if you want to contribute to this, just press the hand raise button, or you can just type down your comments in the question section, and I'll just read it out. Or else, if you press the hand raise button, I'll unmute you, and we'll have an open conversation. I think it's a very, very quick for sure. Uh, one of the challenge. I mean, overall, I'm really getting present the the different world. Why is it that I think differently, and why is it it's difficult to sort of or sort of get other people involved from different age groups uh, when it comes to digital initiatives and talking about that, right? So and personally, I mean, that's my view that Millennials, where I come from, I completely am in sync with what all you shared about us. And but what I'm really not still getting in out of it is that what can I do to make sure that there's this in sync between different generations so that the best can be taken out of us.
Sure. I think I get the point, Kapil. Thanks so much. So, would you like me to hold for a while, or should I answer your question right
Sure,
away?
there are two more people who've suggested them.
Okay.
Sandeep is saying that millennials are lucky than any other group for sure. I mean, in a way, we are the largest in any way.
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Sure, sure, sure.
Mr. Bhatt, you're saying that Indian millennials are fast,
Kapil, there's a
accurate,
distortion in the volume.
and they know what they wish to achieve.
Sorry, Kapil,
Sorry,
I missed that bit.
I'll just read it out again. Okay, I'll just read it again.
Sure.
Aliskar is saying Indian millennials are fast, clever, and accurate in their goals, and they know what they wish to achieve.
Okay, I think there was a bit of a disturbance on the line, but I just hope I've understood that correctly. Is that really speaking, what uh, the two participants are really sharing is that uh, yes, the Indian millennial is a different, kind of grouping at all, if at all I could call them, is that they, because of this worldview that they've established in terms of being, the millennial generation, coupled with a lot of their traditional, viewpoints, they are becoming a stronger generation of people in the entire world, as we put it. Am I correct in my understanding?
Yes.
Yeah. So
So
yes,
just you can actually read out it there in the question section.
yeah. So I'm saying yes. Actually, that is what it is, and if you really ask me, that is a fact. Okay. I'm turning around and saying is that yes, I think we need to be very clear about this, that the Indian, millennial is becoming a very very powerful force across the world, and this is also becoming very apparent from the various positions of authority that the Indian millennial is kind of taking up across the world. Okay, you have people in policy making roles in the various governments across the world. You have people in the World Bank. You have people who are of Indian origin, this who are millennials, and maybe to some extent Gen Xers also, who are kind of taking up roles which are very very policy driven roles. So um, yeah, you're right, and they are very well balanced, Sandeep, for that matter. And Sushant is also kind of saying the same thing. So I'm saying, it's absolutely bang on the button that we're talking about. So it's time that we, as the Indian millennial, kind of took this to the next level, and maybe even shared some of these concepts across the world, because the objective is that you hear a lot of these things that make the world a better place. And I think somewhere we all have to take these roles and take it to the next level. So thanks for sharing some of these points. If there is a last question, I don't mind taking that before I move on slightly further in terms of some of the recommendations we need to make.
Couple of questions.
Yeah.
Um, Give me a minute. Yeah, there was a question from Nishchala. She wants to know what leadership skills should the millennial leaders build to stay connected with the two generations?
See, I think in Nischala, you said
Right.
Nischala. Just stay with me for just a few more moments. I will be making certain recommendations, which will help you possibly climb up the chain in terms of what you need to do. So just stay with me for a while, and in case I don't answer your query, please do not hesitate to quickly post this again. You know, so I think there is another question which is kind of showing up over here, and this is coming from Radesh. I agree when you said that the DNA is the same between different generations. I left a good job to start my own company, and my father did the same thing when he was young. But the thought process between us is different. The opportunities today are more than what they were for my father. Yes, so yes, millennials are lucky in that way. Bang on, I agree with you, and I couldn't appreciate this point of view more than what you've shared, because I'm sure your dad would be typically in the baby boomer segment also, if not I think he would be in the baby boomer segment, and that's credit to him. Um, and there is another question which is coming from Sharad, which I'm seeing over here, is that how best to build connects and lead the millennials. Sharad, I'm going to answer these as we go forward. So just hang in there with this. And the observation that Shushant has made is that the current Indian team is best example of the current millennial group, full of talent, confidence, and desire to do something. Yes, bang on. And of course, Dhoni possibly falls into the baby boomer segment. He's in the last stage of the baby boomer segment, possibly. I think because he's about 38 or 39, maybe just the borderline over there. So I guess that's where it is. Um, I've got another question which Aparna has kind of shot here. A mix of strengths of previous generation and a vision for the generation next makes the millennial group perform better. Quite possible, quite possible, and I think that's a discovery that possibly I'm also going to kind of explore further, because for me this is a huge topic. Okay, and I do intend to kind of discuss it, because I deal with about 162 people as a part of my team in the Times Group, and I have to be very conscious about some of these aspects. While these are not the official point of view, but that's just my leadership style. That's about it. So that's where it is. And we've got a question from Dhruv, or is that observation? Indian millennials consist of the major workforce and are the ones who are in the race of survival of the fittest. One decision of their life where will can extremely change the life career made as positive or negative manner. What steps should they take in life so that they don't face failures? It's a very, very, I think that's a very prescriptive kind of question or a point that you've raised. But let me come and try and address some of these concerns towards the end of the presentation. I've got Prerna, I've got Nischala again, and I've got Ali Asgar. I've got a whole lot of people, so I'm running out of time. I will take the question which has been raised by Prerna, because she's the one I haven't kind of answered back to. So do you think millennials are much more passionate for work they do, or has it always been this way? Um, I'd like to reserve my comments on that, Prerna, because there is a point of view that a lot of us have, is that when you take an activist kind of view and you throw it at a baby boomer, there is bound to be a bit of a disconnect in terms of how it is viewed. So I'm saying your point of view is also correct, and so is mine. So I'm saying we really need to look at it more in detail. And this is something that I don't want to sit in judgment on, because, my worldview is different from your worldview. Although my DNAs are more or less similar, and I've kind of trained my mind to kind of respond to things in different manners, but I'm saying I'd like to reserve it there. Yeah. And in terms of the very last question I'm taking is from Ashish. Tips for motivating millennials. I'm going to come to that in a while. Let's look at some of those aspects. So I'm saying this is what I want to really share with you. And I think a lot of your questions are around this topic, is that close to 95% of the workforce are a mix of baby boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. And the biggest segment is the millennials, who are being, in most cases, managed by Gen Xers. In marginal cases, it might be the reverse also, so that's okay. To be able to effectively lead this group, or for that matter, any group, and this is the answer to some of your questions that you all asked, the one thing that you need to really win is the hearts and minds of these groups. You need to be emotionally connected with their belief system, and to allow them a lot of understanding before you stand in judgment on them. And this is not from any other point of view, but from a manager subordinate kind of perspective that I'm talking about. Is that if you're a Gen Xer and you're managing a millennial, please understand their worldviews. Understand the point of view that your colleague or your subordinate is actually expressing before you make a statement. I've heard radio, um, statements where you have um, on Radio Mirchi various aspects of what you call as vent your anger and stuff like that in different versions. Of course, you have a lot of these shows, but on Radio Mirchi, I heard the one which was yesterday where a gentleman kind of said that we don't want to be told how to do things. We want to be coached in terms of how to do those very things better. We have been educated, we have picked up our education, we understand the basics. Rather than lecturing us on how to do things, give us a better way, coach us through a better way of doing the same thing that we are doing. And that's the attitude that we need to understand better. If I can answer it, and share that perspective with you. So I think somewhere we need to really check this out. Okay. So moving forward, I'd really like to share with you is that uh, there are some very clear researched behaviors and researched aspects which are being driven around the millennial generation. Is that the millennial has one very strong acronym attached to this. Is that it's called YOLO. It's you only live once. Okay, maybe an often mocked acronym, but it represents something very real for the millennial: the desire to be the first to experience anything. Okay, whether it's to go out, or whether it's the music, or it's whether to see a movie, or whether it's to be adventurous, and whether it's whatever it is, they want to be the first. They want to take a first-hand experience there. They want to be the first set of people, and they want to kind of consume things which are not driven by any traditional perspectives. Okay. Um, this is a research study which was carried out by CEB Global. I've given the links to you over there because this is an infographic which I've sourced from them. And you really need to, if you want to get a deeper understanding, read through this article. You'd get a lot more insights. Uh, it's also very likely that you'll find a member of the millennial generation surely deciding to remain living under the parents' roof, or crowdsourcing goods not to fund the purchase of a home or wedding, but rather to embark on an adventurous vacation. This is so very true. I, by the way, have a millennial in my house, and I also have a Gen Zer. Okay, I haven't really studied the Gen Zer deeply, but I'm still struggling with the millennial that I have at home. Okay, because while he started to work, he's very clear. It's dad's car, it's dad's suits, it's dad's shirts, and it's dad's wallet whenever he can get his hands on it. Although I'm very careful that I stay away, I keep that under lock and key kind of thing. But that's the way it is. But this is the millennial, so get used to it. Okay, and trust me, because I understand this subject, um, my home is a better place. Okay, although my wife really kills me when she hears about some of the chaos that has been happening around her, or when she's gone and so on and so forth. But that's the way it is. Another perspective that I'd like to share with you is that somebody asked a question some time back, is that how will I succeed? Okay, how will I be more successful? How can I ensure that my motivation levels are very high? This is a slide which I had initially decided not to really share, but I think it's very important for you all to understand that this is how you will, get an understanding of how to motivate. Motivation in my mind is something that is well within all of us. Okay. We don't need to find people to tell us that, we are doing a good job, or we are doing this, or we're doing that. It's just there. If you're doing a good job, we're doing a good job. It's as simple as it gets. And the you know the proof of a pudding is in eating it, actually. So I'm saying you will end up in a situation where you will feel that you need to be motivated, but remember, motivation is within you. And for millennials, the way to find your own motivation is in terms of, you know, do what you're do what makes you most happy. Okay, engage in your passion. Don't restrict yourselves to, just one, two odd things. Look for diversity in what you're doing. Share things with your friends, family, colleagues, and also embark on a spirit of discovery. Okay, because these are things which will get you to kind of, make yourself more motivated. On the other side, if you look at the older generations, the older generations really got a very strong kick out of justice, integrity, family, practicality, duty, which are very low on the shopping list for millennials. But I'm saying these are all very generic observations. When you, as a millennial, kind of start making those, what you call as bridges between your happiness, your passion, your diversity, the concept of sharing and discovery, and you link it in with the values that older generations believe in, you're actually creating a different world for yourself, ladies and gentlemen. You're really rocking it because you're creating a generation which is going to be one of the most powerful generations this world has ever seen. So I'm turning around and saying, you don't need your answers from me. Your answers are in terms of identifying these values that you have and link them up or build bridges with the values that the older generations had. I'm 100% sure we're never going to be able to do a 100% match. But even those small efforts to build those bridges changes the way you feel about life, changes the way your older generations feel about life, and in a manner of speaking, it actually changes the perspective that you have to actually become better uh, motivated millennials, as I believe it is. So I hope somewhere I've been able to address some of the questions that you all asked. And going forward, is that you know this is what you all are really looking at. Millennials are looking at an identity. They are looking at supporting causes. You're wanting to get into activist kind of roles. You're connected. You're communitized. You're crowdsourcing your answers. you know you want to decide. You are the deciders, whether it is to do with the social causes like the Yamuna cleaning, or it is to do with the social cause of Nirbhaya, or it is the social cause of making sure that you vote a different government into the into governance, and so on and so forth. You're the differentiation. And within the millennial generation, there are two distinct groups, so you will see a little bit of difference in terms of thinking. So the younger group of millennials will be bordering towards the Gen Zers, and the older group will also have some aspects of the baby boomers. So I'm saying this is the reason why this group is becoming a very lethal group, and it is going to become the group which is going to take decisions for the future. It's very important to treat them well, and to for some of you who are kind of growing into leadership roles, it's also important to get an understanding of what you need to go for. Okay, because this is the group which is surrounded by digital all the time. And while I've done one session with you all, the differentiation that is really happening around us is in your connectivity. Is that today I'll walk away from this session, but you will still be connected to the World Wide Web, and digital will be shaping your worldviews. You will all be always connected, and technology is typically your second skin. Okay, so I'm saying there have got to be repeated efforts made to change your worldviews, to bridge the gaps between the various generations, and to make the world a better place. The millennial today owns a smartphone. 99% of them do. Their life is all surrounded by text, WhatsApp, retweets, likes, social media and emoticon, crowdsourcing decision making. They're obsessed with perception, have their own website or blogs. So we're talking about, we're talking about a different world, completely different world. Yeah. So that's where it is. And 5 years ago, you really discover a lot of stuff on the world, on the web. And I am, of course, I have tried a huge aspect to bridge my, differences between millennials, baby boomers, Gen Xers, and Gen Zers. And I do a lot of reading up in how I manage my, interactions. I came across an article which was published about nearly 5 years back by a lady whose her name is Jean C. Miester and Carrie Villiard. And they talked about these concepts in aspects of called workforce 2020 and stuff like that. And she wrote that 5 years back, millennials would account for over 50% of the workforce. And trust me, if I had seen this article that time, I would have scoffed at her and said that, well, this is all a big set of bull that she's talking about, and we'll still be in control kind of stuff. But I'm saying that's true. That's completely true. So the article also highlighted the top 5 requirements millennials had, and these are a reality in today's world. Just look at this. My requirement, which I've come across from the millennials, and what they express is that what do they need from their bosses? They don't want to be, told this, that, and X, Y, Z. They don't. They want help to navigate the career path. They expect their boss not to, play games with them, but to give them straight feedback. They expect their bosses to mentor and coach them. And they want to be a part of sponsored formal development programs. So if you're saying, how will you win in your respective organizations? Strongly go out and seek these things from your boss. If you're not getting them from him, go out and seek them from him. Okay? Look for a good coach in your life. Get a good mentor. And try and be a part of as many sponsored programs that you can be a part of. And convince your boss that you're 24/7 connected. This millennial is also looking at some expectations which they have from their company. Is that the company will develop the skills for their future. The company has very strong values, and the reward and recognition system and the benefits and reward system is very well suited to the individual. There is a clear career path, and there is a huge amount of work-life balance. Some of the aspects that a millennial is really looking for is to learn technical skills in their area of expertise. They want to learn how to manage themselves and how to be personally very productive. A lot of your questions, which I've just seen, all kind of point to these value systems, which means that these researches were well documented, well thought out, and so on and so forth. Millennials are also looking at getting into leadership roles and learning about leadership. Millennials are working towards industry and functional knowledge, and also getting into creativity and innovative strategies to look at how they can become more competitive in whatever they're doing. So I'm saying whatever questions I've seen that have got thrown up at me by various participants, wow, it's an eye opener for me, because all of you are kind of on the same wavelength. So I'm saying there's no harm in being self-centric, and you've got to be balanced in the whole approach. I think that's a point that Sandeep has also made. Okay, so Sandeep, good one. Thanks so much. So let me just move forward slightly more in making a quick summary of the millennials. Millennials view work as a key part of life. They also want to find work that is personally fulfilling. And this goes more towards, quickly holding a mirror to all of you and sharing with you is that, yes, guys, have a look at what you guys are looking at. They are looking at total fulfillment. They want to be mentored, not lectured to. They want to be coached through their mental minefield, because there are a whole lot of confusing issues with them. They want to try and belong as a community. They want to be socially responsible. So I'm saying these are all areas where you need to actively search for options to learn. If you don't have formal options to learn, get a good coach to walk you through these processes. And if your organization has a mentoring program like we have in Times and stuff like that, please get people to mentor you. And that's the way forward. And in a quick summary, which I'd like to really kind of share with all of you, um, is that the millennial really wants to be approachable, open, and transparent. The millennial wants to be ethical, fair, honest, and trustworthy, and analytical. They want to do, they want to develop their skills, they want to inspire, encourage, and motivate people. They want to treat others with respect and dignity, and they want to foster an inclusive environment rather than an individualistic environment. They also want to communicate clearly through conveying their opinions and ideas, have truthful and transparent conversations, solicit, accept, and take action based on subordinate feedbacks. This, in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, is what the millennial is. You really do need to deal with this millennial very, very differently and very, very ably. And going back to it, the reason why you need to do this is very, 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 very clear, is that you do need to kind of make sure that you deal with this group, which is today constituting 50% of the workforce. Okay. Now, I think we've had a fairly long session, and I think, Kapil, we are about 15 minutes over the scheduled,
Yeah.
program. So help me understand that if there are any last one or two clarifications that you want me to take up, I'll be willing to do it. Or alternatively, you can tweet them to me. I'll try and answer them and stuff like that, whichever way you want.
Great. So, Rajdeep, really want to thank you for taking time out and helping us understand what's really going on um, while dealing with people at various age groups. Personally, I was born in the year 78, so still a couple of years since I'm part of the millennial group. So I can relate to it, what I'm going through and what I'll be going through very soon. Guys, we have already exceeded by 10 minutes. And one other thing that I wanted to share is that this is the first time we've tried out a different kind of a webinar. The thing that really impacts us a lot, but I mean, even though it has nothing to do with digital marketing, I hope you like this concept. So I would definitely like to hear from some of you your views on how did you really like this session in particular. And you can actually send out a mail to me at kapil@digitalvidya.com. And if you have any other suggestions for any of the future webinar, you can just share your thoughts over there. And I'll do my best to take care of whichever way you want us to improve on in our webinar sessions.
Sure.
Since we've short of time, what I would request is, as Rajdeep has already mentioned, you can send out the questions to Rajdeep directly, address him on Twitter, or else we would be sharing with you the presentation as well as the recording of today's session. And we'll also be doing a blog post on it, so you can just put your questions in the comments in that blog post, and I would request Rajdeep to respond to that as well. So whenever we see a question from our side, we'll just forward it to Rajdeep and request him for a reply. I just have in the chat section, I've just shared with you the link of our next webinar. So those of you who are interested, you can actually join in sometime later. Other than that, I mean, just quick 1 minute, you can say, commercial break. We do 6 months course in digital marketing. So those of you who've not done it and you're interested to participate in it, you can just mention yes over here, or you can mention maybe over here, and someone from our team will call you. So just take a few seconds on your part. Would request all of you to please do that. Uh, Great. So Rajdeep, any final set of advice or comments from your side before we close the session?
Uh, I'm just turning around and saying that have a blast. Okay, there is more to life than getting bogged down by you know uh, black and whites. Also live the gray areas. It changes the perspective of how you need to go forward. Thanks.
Great. So, guys, thank you very much for your participation today, and I look forward to seeing you in our upcoming webinars. Thanks a lot, Rajdeep, once again for taking time out. It was really a wonderful
Appreciate
session.
it, and
Thanks a
thanks to
lot.
the entire group. I really hope that I've been able to make a difference to where you all think. All the best. Cheers.
Thanks.
You will no longer hear beeps until someone else joins.